Hey guys, this is Joey or Rowan. I'm doing a video response to Lady Fairy Moon's Real Talk, and she talked about all sorts of things, but the thing that I thought I would video response about is my experiences with spirits and the supernatural, I guess. Okay, so I think where we're going to start is that I'm one of three sisters, and I'm clairvoyant, so I see spirits. My middle sister is clairaudient, so she hears them, and the youngest is clairsentient, so she senses them, but she doesn't hear them or see them. As young children, we were all quite open and honest about it, actually, and I used to see a Victorian lady. My nana was fascinated with all of it, and we'd just talk about it. You know, it didn't really frighten us as children. The only thing that used to frighten me as a kid was sometimes I couldn't be alone in my upstairs at my nana's. So if I'd have gone upstairs to go to the toilet, I would run back downstairs as fast as possible. I didn't like being up there by myself. So small children, it wasn't really that much of an issue. Oh, and I had one, I forgot about this, but I had one male spirit that used to follow me around, and I used to call him Red because he had red hair. And he used to follow me around, and he was a young boy, and I used to talk to him, and I later found out that who he was, and he was my dead uncle who had died as a young man, which freaked me out when I was a child I thought it was my imaginary friend, and then I saw a picture of him and realised who it was. So there was that, and as I said, growing up, we didn't have too much of an issue with it. We had some experiences which were, not too bad. I was walking through the town centre once, and I saw a nun, and she was in a bright blue habit and full get-up, and I'd never seen a nun in bright blue get-up before. And I turned to my sister and said, "Did you see the nun?" And she looked at me like I was nuts and said, "What nun?" And I turned around and she'd gone. And that's the first time I remember seeing almost full corporeal spirit. Like it's different when I see them. It's not like seeing a person in front of me. It's different. Often you see shadows or shapes, or you get an image and you can see it but not see it. It's odd. But that was the first time that I'd seen one, and it was only when I turned around and realised that they were gone, but it wasn't there. So there was that. The house where my mother lives currently is a very, very negative, awful space, partly because my mother. I would try and cleanse it. I would spend hours and hours trying to cleanse it with my smudge stick, and I'd spend hours trying to do that, and within 10-15 minutes it'd be bad again. And I don't have to go there anymore, thank goodness. But me and my partner went there to pick some things up, and afterwards we had headaches, we were drained, it made me feel sick. So in that house it attracted a lot of negative energy. It felt oppressive. There were things that would happen. The TV would turn itself on and off sometimes. I was in the bathroom once, and this scared me so badly. There was a shelf in front of the mirror, and I couldn't see anything, which is what I was used to, and suddenly the glass just wonk, slid from left to right, and as if to go off. I caught it. It was horrid. It frightened me. I had like a wind chime. It's not like a wind chime, like it was like metal wound round like that in the corner of the room, and it would rotate, and then it would stop and rotate the other way, and I would go and see if I could find a breeze and things, and couldn't find anything. And quite often in that house I used to feel this, and my middle sister used to feel it. It's this overwhelming sense of, I used to call it just, oh my god, get out. And it was this overwhelming sense of panic, like you had to get downstairs, you had to get out of the house, and if you felt it, you went. But I never stayed to see what would happen if I didn't. I always just didn't want to know. I didn't want to find out, really. In that house I used to see things, and some of it wasn't so bad, some of it wasn't really very awful. I saw someone once and they only had half a face. That wasn't very pleasant. My middle sister, who hears things, got to the point where she had to sleep with her headphones on and music blaring in her ears, because if she didn't, she would hear things all night long, even after setting protection up, even after she visualised her ears being white to try and stop it. White light to stop the things, and she would hear hissing and people saying unpleasant things in her ear. We found out many years later, after, you know, I mean, at first she thought she was going nuts when she was hearing voices all night. We found out years later that my mother had had the same gift as a young person and never thought to tell anybody. So there you go. So she would hear things, I would see things. I remember one occasion that I ran into her room in the middle of the night because I was scared that something was going to be attacking her. There were feelings like that, and we used to have horrific nightmares sometimes. In that place was just, it belongs in a horror movie, really. If anything negative is going to show up, that's probably where it would go. When I moved away and went to university, I started openly studying and learning more about the craft, because when I was at home, I couldn't really learn to protect myself. Everything I've learned to do is by myself. I have had interactions with other people, but generally speaking, I'm solitary. So we went to university and we had a few things happen, and I was surprised. I didn't think there was going to be that much happening in a university space. I suppose it makes sense because people pass through all the time, and obviously some of them must not make it, but yeah, there's one of the scariest things that happened to me actually happened at university. I was going upstairs and I felt an energy come at me, and I went nope, and I literally flicked my hand and didn't think anything of it. And later that night my boyfriend started behaving at the time, not anymore, started behaving very weirdly, and he was possessed by something, and he would just sit there like this, and then he'd start laughing his head off, like, and he was like madly laughing at nothing, and then he'd like switch and he'd be him again. Scared of him. It happened to him twice in the time that I know him, and I don't know if he was just like a weak-minded individual, and because I was attracting spirits, and I don't know. It was awful. We didn't know how to deal with it, but there was someone on campus who did know how to deal with it, so we got it sorted out that time. And later he was in that house of my mother's, and I mean, I had to project white light through him, and he said we'd sorted it out, and I was suspicious that we hadn't sorted it out properly, and he was never as much of a nice person ever again, so I don't know. So, right, since I've been in this house with my gnome, and before I was here, this is a much more positive space. This is not a negative space. Both me and the gnome have lived in oppressive atmospheres, so we know what it feels like. He used to, I think it was one of his major family homes, and am I right in saying he used to have nightmares about green clouds in that place?
Yes.
Yeah.
Among other nightmares.
He used to have a lot of nightmares in that house, and he used to have a recurring nightmare about a green cloud following him, and I think that was that little place where you dreamt that you used to get recurring nightmares about being held up to the ceiling by an invisible force.
That was only the one dream that I had of that occasion, but it's the most vivid and realistic dream I've ever had in my life.
Okay, so there we go. And in that house, he had one really weird experience where he was on his own in the house upstairs, and he heard this noises like someone was blowing his living room apart, like they were throwing the furniture around, like, you know, crashing, banging. He didn't know why the neighbours weren't coming around. He was thinking when his parents get home they're going to think he'd broken up the joint, and it was quite scary. And when it all stopped and his parents came home, there was nothing out of place downstairs. It was fine. but the noises were as loud and scary as if someone had been throwing things around.
I barred my bedroom door and opened my window to prepare for an emergency exit. That's how real they were to me. I thought someone was going to come up the stairs, and the stairs creaked, so I knew if someone would come up the stairs. So I was prepared for that, and I was prepared to go out my bedroom window.
There you go. It was that scary. That's my phone. It was that scary that he was ready to exit. And talking about that, something happened in this house very similar to me. Not negative so much as I was not very well in the daytime. I'd gone for a nap and I wasn't asleep. I was dozing but not asleep, and I heard someone coming up the stairs, and it was so loud and so real to me that I armed myself because I thought someone was in the house. I was on the floor, crouched, ready to fight or flee because I thought somebody was in the house and coming upstairs, and there was no one there. And I'd heard that like someone had come up the stairs, and nobody there. Also, in that bedroom is where we hear a lot of the stuff that happens in this house. Last week I heard 3 definite knocks on the side of the bed when I was in there. And it scared me because 3 knocks is supposed to signify someone close to you crossing over. And I was like, oh God. I was tempted to go ringing around and be like, is everybody alright? But there you go. And let's see, what else have we got? Oh, in this house, before I was here, the gnome had been going through a very troubled period of sleep. And he video recorded himself at night, paranormal activity, to see if...
It was before that movie.
I know, it was before that movie. I just wouldn't do it, it would scare me crap. Right, but he video recorded himself to see if anything was disturbing his sleep. And he didn't get anything on the camera, but on the audio there is noises like in the far corner of the room, like someone moving boxes around. And we're in a house. There's no one up there. But there's very definite moving sort of noises. We have that audio. I will see if I can attach it to a video or something and try and upload it. Right, and since we've both been here, I mentioned the footsteps and the knocking, so I think the only thing left to mention in this house is the flashes of light. Now behind me, this way, is the banister of the stairwell, and the gnome had seen it happen a few times, and the first time he said it happened in the day, and it's like a flash out there, like someone had turned a light on and off, and he dismissed it the first couple of times it had happened as something, and he like saw it in the reflection. There's pictures on the walls facing that way, and he'd seen it in the reflection, so he just thought. Anyway, we were both in here, and I think we'd heard something, so we were alert, thinking what was that, and then suddenly we both saw a flash of light back there. And I said, what on earth was that? Had the lights blown? A lot of the activity also that happens in this house happens after the fire alarm goes off, like it's disturbed somebody. Like I said, nothing in this house has ever felt negative. The knocking and the noises on the stairs frightened me, but there was nothing after that. So I think, I've met someone making themselves known, but because it frightened me, I didn't go any further than that. I started speaking to them. I was in the bathroom, and the shower curtain moved, and I was like, all right, fine, and I talked to the person. When I was in my mother's house, I'd set up almost a conveyor belt because there was so much spirit activity to try and keep people moving on. Because a lot of that time when I saw them, that's what they wanted, acknowledgement and moving on. But there were so many of them, it would keep me up all night. And I was just like, move, move along, move along, keep going, move along. And I'd set up almost like a spiritual conveyor belt just to keep people moving through. Yes, so very different experiences depending on where I've been. I've realised recently that I have to embrace it, because I've realised or not realised, my patron goddess was revealed to me recently, and that it is Morrigan, who is not who I was expecting, but she's a lot like Hecate in a lot of ways. She's lady of life, death and rebirth, only she's more of a warrior soul. And she's the silent watcher who watches over the dead, and I can see them, the dead, so I'm having to embrace this and keep going. But there we go, I think I've covered everything I meant to. I made a list. Let's just check. Yes, I think that's everything I wanted to cover. There are a few other instances where I've seen shadows, shapes. I saw a small child run around my bedroom when I was in one university place, and heard him laughing, and then he ran around the room a few times and disappeared. Never saw him again. I think that's it mostly. So that was my video response on spiritual activity with some gnome inputs. So thanks very much, and blessed be.